Hello. Hopefully, I am heard here. If you can hear me, go ahead and let me know in the chat box. I think we're still waiting for a few people, so give them a minute. Can you hear me okay? I am answering, if you can hear me, I'm answering Tatiana's question. Where is the webinar? You are here. So hopefully you made it. Okay. All right, well, we have a few people on, and this is going to be recorded for people who, okay, great. Thanks, Raju. He said you can hear me, so that's great. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. Since this is recorded, if you guys have questions or, and I do encourage participation. So if, as I'm talking, you kind of think of something you want to add or want to ask a question, I have the question panel open, so you can just type it in there, and then I'll just be able to respond to that as I get to it. And yeah, we're going to talk about, we're going to go into some systems today and kind of poke around, so it'll be hopefully interactive for you. So if you have a Microsoft Word, you might want to open that so you can kind of play around with it as we talk. All right, so I'm going to officially begin, and thanks again for your participation today. Okay, hello, I am Stacy Brown from MindLink Resources, and today we're going to talk about proofreading, testing, and QA. And I'm going to get to my right slide. There we go. So the first thing we're going to talk about, and I apologize for my rudimentary slides, but it's the content that matters. But the first thing we're going to do is talk about the difference between proofreading, testing, and QA. And then basically we're just going to talk about each phase with tips for how to be effective at each one of those tasks. As linguists, we often get asked to do these kind of tasks, and actually proofreading, testing, and QA are all great ways to get involved in the language industry for us, somebody new. Or it's also great to, new to the business, new to the industry, great way to get experience with content. But it's also, people that are good at it, it can be a big opportunity and something, to really build a career on. So I encourage you to learn as much as you can about these things as a linguist, since you will be asked to do them many times. So I'm going to really emphasize proofreading today because this has come up a few times in recent projects, and I think we have some good tips to offer there. So first, the difference between proofreading, testing, and QA. Proofreading is editing a document that has been translated by someone else. So a translator's translated it, and a proofreader usually will update the document in the source text, whether you're using a computer-aided translation or CAT tool, or directly in Microsoft Word or Microsoft Excel or whatever format the source is in. We've even done it in Adobe by adding comments. So but basically, you know, when you're asked to do a proofreading, or sometimes it's called editing, when you're asked to do these tasks, the assumption is that you will be updating the source text directly. Okay. Testing is, and a lot of people confuse testing and QA, even seasoned professionals. And I've been in the testing and QA world for, 18 years. And I even interchange these, but there is actually technically a difference. And I think it's good for us to know the difference, even though sometimes you may be asked to do a testing task, but when you look at the actual instructions, you can see it's actually a QA task, or vice versa. They can come to you and ask you to do, and I've had this happen where they brought they called it localization QA, LQA, localization QA task. And when I looked at the actual task, the actual instructions, it was clear to me that this wasn't even a testing task, it was a proofreading task. So you have to kind of be careful, because sometimes the project managers don't even get these terminology right. But I think it's good as the tester, as the QA professional, that you know the nuances between these. Testing then is measuring a document or a system against the requirements. So essentially you're given, and a good example is you might be given a spreadsheet of, of expectations for the document, or even we've gotten them where they're URLs. So but there's the source, and then there's the or the target and the source. So sometimes those are actually more QA. Actually, I'm correcting myself here. But testing is kind of they provide the requirements, and then you go through the document or the content and make sure it meets the requirements. And sometimes them providing the requirements is really just the source. So you're looking at the translated text and you're making sure it matches the source or the expectations. And I think it's really good, if you're really going to be deep into testing, it's good to have as much information about the source as possible. And this kind of goes through QA too. QA is more the whole shebang. You're looking at everything there. It's beyond just testing, which is, and usually testing, you would have a test plan or some sort of a method to know exactly what the expectations. QA, you don't always have a test plan, but it's more of what they want you to do, or sometimes, like I said, they call it LQA. What they want you to do is interface with the content as if you are the end customer and provide that feedback. And so what you're essentially doing here is trying to uncover bugs, and you're looking at everything: formatting, links, cultural sensitivity, etc. Here's my so proofreading, testing, and QA are not that scary, but it's good to understand those nuances. But like I said, I'm going to really focus on proofreading today. Do you guys have any questions before I go too far? I don't see any in the panel, but feel free to post, and I will try to answer the best I can. Cool. All right, so let's talk about proofreading. And we're going to talk about what to do when you're proofreading. We're going to talk about what not to do or what to beware of. And the big issue here is our preferential issues. And so we're going to talk about what that is. And then we're going to go through some proofreading tools and actually look at the tools directly. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so when you are proofreading, the main focus of you when you're proofreading or editing a translated text, you want to, the first priority is to make sure that the translation conveys the meaning of the English source. That's pretty simple, and yet it can be a challenge. So because there are things that really change in meaning, like for example, we recently had a project where they asked us to translate store number, and so people assumed that was the phone number of the store. But when the proofreader looked into it and did a little research about what the meaning was and the context of that, it actually wasn't asking for the phone number, even though that's how the translator translated it. It was actually asking for the store number, you know, as in this store is assigned a number by the company. And so that they were asking for that in the training. And so that's an example of what I'm talking about, of, you know, simple things. You, as a proofreader, you're kind of coming at it from a high level and looking for, you know, the meaning of the English so that you can make sure that the source document or the target reflects that. So in some ways, you know, editing proofreading's, you know, more challenging than translation. So the second thing, and this is probably in order of importance, is to make sure it is free of typos and grammar mistakes. So, you know, that kind of goes without saying, and usually people dive right into that and kind of forget number one, or a proofreader might assume the translator knew what they were talking about. But, you know, as a proofreader, you have to really come in with a critical eye, right? Another thing a proofreader is expected to do is make sure that terms are consistent throughout the document. It's easy to miss that when you're a translator. And so, you know, being able to go through and make sure that product names are, you know, consistent and phrases are consistent and that the voice sounds correct throughout the whole document. And I know we've done projects that were sizable projects and they had a short deadline. And so we ended up putting multiple translators on the project. And we really relied on that proofreader to go through and make sure that the voice was consistent and pull all of those together so that it sounded like one translator did the whole thing. I don't always recommend that method, but it does work when the deadlines are tight. Another thing an editor would do or a proofreader would do is ensure the translation follows glossaries and memories that are assigned to the translation. You know, again, a translator may, you know, use some liberties with the text. And so as the proofreader, you have to be kind of the cop, make sure that, you know, that it's meeting the needs of the customer and using the proper terminology and memory. You know, other things I didn't list here, but like making sure product names, trademarks, you know, these kind of things are also used correctly. So there's kind of, and maybe, I don't know if any of you can think of other things we could add to this list. But yeah, the list is quite long, as you can see. I mean, the responsibilities are quite heavy. So I think, you know, that, but at the same time, I see a lot of translators, and it kind of takes us to our next topic, what not to do. Because I see a lot of editors or proofreaders almost retranslating the translation. And that is a big waste of time when you're focusing on preferential issues. So a lot of proofreaders might go through and, you know, just say it in a different way that maybe they like better, or it's not necessarily wrong, but, you know, there's just a better way in their opinion to say it. And so I've seen, you know, proofreaders change 70% of the translation text. In that case, they might as well have just translated it. So you really have to know your role as a proofreader. You're not a second translator. You're actually there to make corrections, not redo it, if that makes sense. Now, if the quality is really bad, that's something where you would take it to, you know, you're the project manager and let them know the quality is bad before you spend extra time on it. This is kind of a big time management issue. And one way to show your project manager if they don't speak your language is to provide back translation. So show them by translating what the target, like for example, if it's being translated into Spanish, and you feel like it was really poor translation, you take the Spanish and translate how they translated it back into English so that you can communicate that to your project manager. And it's a good way to not that you're trying to get the translator in trouble, but you're trying to make a case for why you do need to do some extra redoing of the content. But as a general rule, preferential issues need to be avoided, that you want to just focus on those other the things I mentioned in this slide, which are essentially it's wrong or a mistake. Those are things that you would go ahead and fix. But if it's just in your opinion could be said better, then that's not a great use of your time. So what do I mean by that? Let's go through an example. I actually had an English source here. I don't know how well you can see this. This was a document that was written in English, but it was written by someone who was not an English speaker. So they asked us to go through and edit it so that it flowed better. But I noticed the editor added extra preferential terms. And here's an example where the editor added the word accordingly. So before it didn't have that. So it said, we need to be alert, respond promptly to these trends, and adapt our business practices where necessary. I think that reads just fine. But this editor added the word accordingly, which, may be better, may not be better, but at any sense, that's fine once in a while. But if you go through, this was a 30-page document, and I believe this editor spent a lot of extra time doing a lot of preferential things. So that is an example of what to avoid, if that makes sense. Do you guys have any questions about preferential issues or what to avoid, or anything anybody wants to add? Okay. You guys are quiet today, but it's okay. We kind of went a little earlier today, so than we normally do for these. Okay, well, unless you have other questions, I'm going to move on to the tools. So this is actually, I want to get, and I'm going to show some, this is WordBee. And I believe we've talked about WordBee here before. Oops, sorry, I lost my WordBee. WordBee is the computer-aided translation tool that we use at MindLink. Other tools are very similar to WordBee. WordBee is just a cloud-based tool, so it works really well for our business, and it's the tool we've been using for several years. And this was one of the first projects we used in WordBee, and I don't know if Air made it on the meeting, but she might recognize it. But this is some content we translated into Thai. And what I want to show you, and maybe Thai isn't the best example, but this applies to every language. Sometimes the double bite languages, some things like spell check doesn't work as well, but I can still show you. So if you're using WordBee, WordBee actually gives you the point of a computer-aided translation tool is that it provides you tools that you can use to help while you're translating and also while you're proofreading. So on this document, the first thing I would do if I was coming into this to proofread is run a quality check. And here's a little check. And so what this is going to do is pull up anything, any big issue. And WordBee actually has things to automatically correct double spaces or any spacing issue that might have happened from the translator, which is easy to do when you're translating, and it's very minute detail. So the cool thing is WordBee will just fix that, so you don't have to waste time looking at that. So it'll handle all of that. And the nice thing too with this check is it'll tell you if there's any, if there was something missing, because that comes up a lot where, there's a missing translation. And so the nice thing is if you know right away there's something missing, you can just send it back to the translator and not start your proofreading until you know it's all been done. In this case, everything, no errors were found, which is great. I would hope that would say that. But that would be the first step I would take, is run this check. You can also use this tool to see what the document would look like in the source, you can either preview it, which I think is really great for getting context. So I could hit that preview button and I'm actually looking at it in the source, which is really helpful. And I think, especially if you're looking for consistencies and things like that, you might see something where, oh, wow, they used the wrong product name throughout the whole thing. They forgot to put the trademark at the end of it. And I'm glancing through it and I can see it's throughout the whole thing. So, you know, this is where you could be more efficient. Instead of going one line by line and updating that, this is where you could use this find and replace. So, you know, I could come here and every time that product name comes up, I replace it with name. I replace it with the proper name of the format. So, I mean, with the trademark in it. So that way it does it through the whole document and I don't have to go line by line. So these little tips will help you save a lot of time. The other thing is spell check. Like I said, Thai may not be the best example, but you know, it'll work. And I can run a spell check. Yeah, Thai's not great because everything is misspelled. Let me try this other one. But in other languages, you'll get the proper, it'll highlight in red. Like this shows everything is misspelled, but you know, that's not the case. We know that. But you know, a spell check is like a simple thing. Like don't rely on your own memory. Use the tools that are available. Run a spell check. And this spell checker works with the spell checker set up in a browser. And so, you know, if you need help setting that up, we can help you do that if you're working on one of our projects. So you just have to set the spell checker up in your browser. Most browsers support some version of this or come with it. And so once you have that in there, there you go. So yeah, and then you can also do things like filter. Like I could go in and mark things like, okay, I want to review this later. So I can mark it and later go back and filter it. I can filter on any, you know, missing translation. I can filter. And I think, you know, especially long translations, this can be a really handy way to, you know, again, break it down so that you're just working on what you want to work on. So if you're not, you know, and then of course you have your memory and glossaries over here. And so those are important to look at because they help you. And of course, the translator should be looking at these as well, but it's a good idea to just follow along and make sure that they use the proper glossary and terminology. You know, some of our clients have a very strict requirement to use the glossary. And even though it's counterintuitive of what you want to say, it's still the requirement of the job. And as a proofreader, you need to make sure that that's followed. So this is, you just look over here in this little column, and then that will provide that for you. You know, you can follow along and see who's made changes to the documents and, you know, download files and all kinds of things. So I really, you know, I think there's a tendency to just jump in and kind of go line by line on these jobs. For this job, there's only 2 pages, so, you know, that may be fine. However, you know, on a 30-page document, that's not an efficient way to do proofreading. And ultimately, you know, your goal is you'll need to read the whole thing, but there are things that you can do to catch small things or to do global changes that will make a big difference. So any questions about WordBee? Okay, you guys are easy. Now I want to talk to you about Word. Okay, well, I was trying to fix this document, but we'll just do the best we can here. So in Microsoft Word, there are a bunch of tools that will help you if you're proofreading. So this is a project we did some time ago. I know it's already released. So, but if you go through this document, this is where you can make some changes And you can use some of the proofreading tools. Now, this is in English, so we can all understand it. But if it was in another language, you want to check your language down here in Word. And if you need to change the language, you should have proofreading tools set up on your computer. If these are not set up, it's easy to set them up. Like, say I want to set up the Thai proofreading tools. I just select Thai. Actually, if I go here to review, that's another way to do the same thing. And oh yeah, here it is. I can come here and install. So I got here from language preference. And here you would install the proofreading tools. When I clicked on that, it brought me up to this Microsoft website. And this is where I could go in and just install in my language. Hopefully all of you know this already, but you know, just in case. It's important to have the language that you are proofreading into. So the target language, you have to have the proofreading tools installed. So once those are installed, then you can go back and run a spell check on, you can run a spelling and grammar check. This feels a little bit like cheating, but cheating is, you know, it's allowed. We want you to cheat. So, you know, because the nice thing is when you run a spell check, it will catch it, and then you can change things throughout. It'll also highlight any, you know, you can change it all throughout the whole document. And it'll highlight grammar issues too. And, you know, you might go, oh, okay, this is okay. I'm going to just ignore that. But obviously this was not in US English. It was written in probably British English. And so, yeah, change all is really great. Doing a search and replace is really great. So the point is, make sure that the proper language is set up and that you're running your proofreading in the proper language and that you're using spell check. That is going to save you a ton of time and give you a really good quality output when you're proofreading. Let's see. Another thing, I actually have them on in this document, and a lot of you might not know about it, is this reveal paragraph. So if you're looking at the file like this, it's fine, but it doesn't really give you all the information. If I turn on these codes, I can see where the paragraphs are set, and it'll help me if I see any spacing issues. You know, I can make adjustments if that doesn't need to be like that. So I like to, if I'm proofreading, have those on. Another thing that's really handy to help with consistency is to use these headers, to set up headers and make sure, oops, that was not good. Okay, well, forget that. But you can use these headers and you can customize them. So for example, my document kind of got messed up here, guys. Okay, so yeah, this is obviously a header. And if I want it to be consistent throughout the document, I can just update heading 3 to match this selection. And then anytime I see that, I can, so this is obviously heading 3, but as you can see, the format's off. So if I apply heading 3, well, it messes it up there because I messed it up. But you get the idea. Oh, I see. Well, whoever wrote this document has a very strange format because they use the text box there, which I probably wouldn't do because it makes it harder to use the headers. But this might be a better example. Yeah, and you can see my numbering gets all off. But the thing is, when you're proofreading a document, you know, it should follow these headers. It should follow proper numbering. Because then if you have a change, for example, you do that and then you realize, oh, this actually needs to be a bigger font. The cool thing is, if these are both header 5, then I can change the font here and I update it and it'll change the font throughout the whole document. And again, if it's a long document, 31 pages, that's going to save you so much time. And then it's just a matter of skimming it through. So using these features, and if, you know, I'm really going through these quickly, there are so many tutorials out there that you can go through and learn more about all of these things. I really encourage you to do that if you're not currently. But a couple other things, just as little reminders, using search and replace is really important. And I just do the Control F, which is, will get you here. And this is cool because you can go through and, you know, check all of the product names. So say, I think this is a Nikon document. So I can click on that and see all the results and go through one by one and make sure it is proper. And so it's kind of a cool way to check specific things throughout the document. And I do this a lot if I'm like, I run into something and I think, I wonder if this is a problem somewhere else, or if this phrase happens somewhere else. I can do a search and look for the issues. And then you can also do search and replace if, you know, you need to make some, say there's 2 Ks in it, I don't know. So this is going to go through the whole thing and replace every, see, they made 108 replacements. Do you know how long that would have taken me to do one by one? It would have taken me all day, and I don't have that kind of time. I'm a very busy professional. Okay, well now Microsoft Word has died on me. So I apologize. While it's coming back up, any questions? Are you guys even there? I'm going to look at the chat. I'm feeling kind of lonely. So if you have questions, put them in the question box, and I would love to answer them. Oh, the last thing is track changes. And look how cool. My Word died, but it came back up and it knew what I was working on, and I can always go back to the more recent version. So Word's gotten smarter about this kind of stuff, which is really cool. Oh, thanks, Tuba. I'm not alone. Okay, good. Shoo. But the last thing is on Word are track changes. And this is very common when we're given a document to proofread, to go through and make updates, but make sure your track changes are on when you update. And because then when you deliver to your client, they may ask for the track changes version so they can see what you changed. Thanks, Agnes. So when you're doing track changes, everything that you do, see how it's marked in red here. So this will show that we're making changes to the document and track that. And I have it set up as simple markup. If you want to show exactly what I changed, you can click this to all markup. And this is really cool, especially if you have more than one person working on the document, because you can kind of see who did what. You know, here's a proofreader and here's what I did, and then we can kind of come together. And so I like all markup a lot. Simple markup is nice when you're just kind of working through and you don't want the codes to get in your way. Sometimes when I'm doing the first run of proofreading, I might have no markup going on. But this drop down just has to do with the view you're looking at. It doesn't really reflect what is actually going on. Once this button is on for track changes, you are tracking everything that you do on this document. So it makes it really handy. See, and here I can follow through everything that was done by either me or the other proofreader. So you have to know how to do this. And a lot of times we give projects out and people don't know about track changes, but for any language, this will work. And it'll track even the things that, you do a bulk edit, it'll still show what you changed. And a lot of times when I deliver, when I ask by a client to do a proofreading, I'll deliver the track changes file as well as a final file, which is at the end of it, I'll go through and accept all changes. And so that way I can deliver what I call a clean file to the client. So I'll deliver the clean one. This is totally done, beautiful, ready to go. But in addition, I'm also delivering my track changes file so that you can see that I actually did make some changes when I was proofreading. I think that's a really good practice. It tells your client that you're actually doing something and helping their document out. So track changes, do you guys have questions about that? I know I'm going through this kind of fast, but I think, if you want to get more detail about it, like I said, just Google, how do I do track changes? There are a lot of good resources out there. Cool. All right, so that was a lot for proofreading. Do you guys have questions before I move on to NQA? Okay. Now, testing and QA, we have a lot of training around this, and I have some resources set up on LinguistLink, if you're on LinguistLink, that you can kind of go through and learn more about testing and QA. This generally, especially QA, it's a little more technically involved, so I'm kind of talking about these together today, but again, a whole webinar could be spent on, testing and QA tools. But I think it's really important when you're doing testing again, in the same way that you're looking for efficiencies and cheats for when you proofread, you want to do the same for testing and QA. So don't rely on your brain alone. Use things to help you out. For example, well, if you're doing a testing job, again, the definition of testing was to meet the requirements, right? So you're going to be given a test plan, test instructions, and basically you just need to go step by step and perform the requirements. And so obviously for those kind of projects, it's really important to follow the instructions and be really familiar with them. Even if it's not the first time that you've done that testing, it's a good idea to reread the instructions because they might have changed slightly. So don't assume, make sure you're following those instructions properly. For QA, it's most clients and developers use bug tracking software like Jira. And I think some of you use Jira. It's becoming very widely used, I think. So to report a bug. So if you're going through like a website and you see a bug, you'll need to be able to capture a screenshot. And to do that, I use a system called Jing, J-I-N-G. And I capture the screenshot and then I can upload it into Jira. And it's important when you do that and not just put in the screenshot, but actually, write a thorough explanation of what happened. So like what happened before you saw the bug, what happened during the bug, and what happened after. So like if, for example, you have a problem with hyperlink not working, you can say, the user went to this page, and you write it very scientifically, right? Like, you could write it, I went to this page too, but I like to say, the user went to this page, clicked on, this link, and the link took me to this page. And you can show screenshots of the different pages with arrows pointing to what happened, because that gives the developers a real clear idea of your bug. So again, there's a lot we could say about how to report bug issues, but one thing when you're putting things in the software, one, you give a detailed description, But also it's important to think of the priority of an issue. Like if something is, a broken link might not really be a big deal because it was just in the bottom of the page kind of for the references. Or this is a stoppage issue because the link was said, go to the next page, and I clicked it and it didn't go to the next page. So that's a high priority. So anyway, consider when you log those bugs, what the priority is of those issues so that, it can get the right attention. So don't just, get into a habit of logging bugs. Like actually think about the impact of the bug on the end user, because you're really there as an advocate for the end user when you're doing QA. The other thing is look for global issues like Unicode bugs. And an example of that, if you've ever looked at a web page and they just have the little squares or, gobbledygook, if you know what that means, then it's a sign that the Unicode settings were not established. And then if you kind of scan through the application and you see it coming up throughout, that's when there's probably a Unicode issue. And instead of spending your time and budget going, page by page and capturing screenshots, it's better to just do a one bug that says, global issue throughout this application, the Unicode is set up incorrectly, because that will help your developers. And again, it's an easy fix for them, but to have to go through each one of your bugs, you might log 20 bugs because of that one issue. And so again, consider your time. And if you see it occurring throughout the application, and again, if it's, an example would be if it's a French document and every time there's an accent, you see instead of the letter, it shows up as a square, that's a sign that their Unicode is not set up properly. And so that needs to go back to the developers. So I just, things like that, again, it's kind of common sense, but as a QA professional, you have to really know how to look for that. And again, you have to be very familiar with the English, the source version of the system you're testing. I think a lot of people jump in. I've seen this happen where people jump into the application without really looking at the English source. And so how do you know, something might be, you might be filing bugs for things that are out of scope because the English source doesn't support that. So neither does the translated version. So, things like that, use your common sense, and yeah, you'll do great. We actually have a QA for Dummies document and other training that I put on LinguistLink. I'll show you where. Oh my goodness. All of a sudden I have a lot of windows open on my, so if you go to LinguistLink and go here to resources, I put up a bunch of training. You can come here to training articles. So you're welcome to go through and, some of these may not be relevant, but some of them may be really helpful. So we have the Dummies Guide for QA, and then also some project specific things. So, and there's some stuff about WordBee in there as well. So I encourage you, to take some time and get familiar with all of that. All right, how are you guys doing? Checking in. Okay, cool. Well, that wraps up my content I prepared for you today. But I think I do want to cover a couple things. One, to conclude, when you're proofreading, testing, or providing QA, the first thing is know the task that you're asked to do. And again, like I said before, it may not be what the client describes. They may give you a testing task, but when you really look at it, you're like, this isn't really testing, this is proofreading. Or they may give you, they may call it localization QA, and you realize, oh, this isn't LQA, this is actually testing. Or, so it's good for you to kind of know what you're doing, because it puts you in that mindset of the way you're going to perform the task and how you're going to do it. And this is a tip I always, I've talked about before in our webinars, but remember to summarize with your client what you're going to do. So when you receive the project, write an email and say, I received this project. I'm going to start and I'm going to provide you bug reports in Jira, or, whatever the task is. Because when you're telling them what you're going to do and then you do it, and then at the end, when you provide, for example, when you're providing that proofread document, and again, you provide the clean and the one with the track changes, and you write a little summary, hey, the translation quality was fair. Here's what was strong about it. Here was what was weak about it. And you give them a little added value. Those clients are going to come back to you for more and more projects. That's really a way to set yourself apart as a professional tester or QA or proofreader. When you communicate in that level. So I really encourage everyone who's watching this to make that part of your practice whenever you receive projects, to tell the client what you're going to do it, and then tell them what you did, and then give them a little assessment. It really makes a difference. So cool. Do you guys have any other questions for me? Everybody's been quiet, but I think it's because I'm so clear in my explanations. I doubt that, but so, okay. Well, you guys are awesome. The last thing and for some reason I'm having some technical difficulties today. I want to remind you guys about the incubator that we have right now. It's open. We're taking people, we're still vetting people and taking them into the incubator program. But what we're looking for are people that are really interested in being freelance linguists and doing this as a freelancer. And it doesn't necessarily mean full-time. It could mean part-time or on the side. But what I really want is to help people build themselves up, get known as a freelance linguist, so you can take those side projects or work full-time. Like I've said this many times, there's so much need out there, but you just have to get known. So we have this incubator program, which is basically, I'm going to be working with you one-on-one, and as well as providing links to experienced mentors that will help you. We can help you with technical issues, setting up Word with your proper language proofreading skills, those kind of things. But really, we're going to help you get your business set up, get everything that you need to promote yourself, get you some training. We actually have some training already posted for just finding your specialty and your niche and how to really find the thing that you're going to be known for. So we're really excited about this. Would love to get more of you involved. And I know you guys are, here on this call because you want to learn more about this business. So, don't miss out on this. This is a really great opportunity. Hopefully you received an email from me describing it. If not, I'll send another one this week. And, I strongly encourage you to sign up for this program. And I'm really excited to work with you and help you really get established as a freelance linguist. So you can put as much time into it or as little time into it as you have. But at the end of the day, you'll have, you'll have this skill and a way to present this to the world. So please take advantage of that. And here's the website. If you want to learn more, just go to incubator.mindlinkresources.com. That's my spiel. If there are no more questions, we can call it a day. Any last words or thoughts or anything from you guys? Okay, well, quiet group, but I think it's because you're taking good notes and really taking it all in. So I really appreciate, and I appreciate your time coming today. And And I am excited again to work with you more directly with the incubator if that's something you can do. If not, just stay in touch, come to our webinars, and interact with us. I strongly recommend, if you want to, the best way to get projects and work is to interact and stay involved. And that's who we like to work with. So we will see you online, and I'll let you get back to work. And thanks again for your time today. See you guys.